In this video, we'll be going over core gameplay terminology for all players in Dead by Daylight. There's quite a bit to go over, so let's get right to it. First, we have the matches. Those are called trials. And every map in the game is called the trial grounds. The game is set in another dimension created by the entity. The entity itself creates realms within this dimension to fit its desires for each trial. Each trial is randomly generated and players can influence the entity by using offerings. This can be the trial grounds itself, hooks, the number of chests that spawn, and more. Each trial ground map also has a few variations to them, but will always have their key landmarks. Next is the terror radius. The terror radius is the zone around the killer that emits an audio cue for survivors to know that the killer is nearby. This differs between killers, but the default audio cue is a heartbeat. The red stain. The red stain is a visual cue to allow survivors to see the direction the killer is facing. Scratch marks. Scratch marks are red indicators only seen by the killer. This means that a survivor is running nearby and to search the area or follow it to find the survivor. The blood trail. The blood trail is puddles of blood that survivors leave behind when injured to allow the killer to track the injured survivor. Movement. Survivors have three main ways of movement. The running speed of all the survivors is a base value of 4 meters per second. This is considered 100% movement speed. Any modifications from perks, actions, or status effects is based on this value. Walking speed is 56% of that value, or 2.26 meters per second roughly, and crouching is 28%, or 1.13 meters per second. Then there's crawling, which is when you're put into the dying state. That's 17.5 of your base speed, or 0.7 meters per second. The most common modification to this movement speed is something that's called on-hit sprint. This is when a killer hits a survivor and they gain 150% movement speed, or roughly 6 meters per second for 2 seconds. The killers do not share the same movement speed. Their movement speed differs. To see that information, you need to check out their information kit. I'll be covering killers' kits in a different video. The chase. The chase is when a survivor is located, tries to flee, and the killer is in pursuit. Killers are faster than the survivors, however the survivors have many tools to escape and are more nimble. The chase ends when the survivor gets far enough from the killer, breaks line of sight for a period of time, or the survivor gets hit by the killer. Pallets. Pallets are scattered about randomly. These are used for survivors to create a blockade from the killer, as well as gain distance from them. Pallets can only be dropped by the survivors, and a well-timed drop of the pallet can even stun the killer for a bit. Then, killers can break the drop pallets to remove the obstacle from being used further, however it does take time. Be aware, each pallet can only be dropped once in a trial. Vaulting. Vaulting is another way for survivors to create some distance between them and the killer, or even an obstacle the killer has to go around, since killers can vault also, but very slowly. These can be windows, logs, or any other areas that you can hop over. Be wary, using the same vaulting option within a chase 3 times causes the entity to block it for a bit. Proficiency. Proficiency is indicated by colors and an icon from perks, items, as well as status effects. Yellow means you are getting a boosted effect, and red means you are being hindered. Generators. Generators, or gens for short, are the main objective for survivors, and key hunting grounds for killers. These generate randomly across the trial grounds, and there will always be 2 more than the needed amount to power the exit gate's fuse box. The total amount of generators that need to be fixed by the survivors is always 1 more than the total survivors that loaded into the trial. You can see this on the bottom left corner of the UI. Gens that were worked on by a survivor but weren't completed can be damaged by the killer. This slowly regresses the progress till it reaches 0%. Damaged gens emit sparks indicating to survivors that it's losing progress, and to touch it by using the repair action to stop the regression. One thing to note is that if multiple survivors repair the same generator, a 15% efficiency penalty is applied to the repair speed. This may sound like a negative, however, one survivor can repair a single gen in 80 seconds. Two can complete it in 47 seconds. It is still faster. The exit gates. The exit gates are always in two randomly placed locations at the edges of the trial grounds and are visible at all times but unusable until certain conditions are achieved. It takes 20 seconds to power the gate doors by interacting with its fuse box, and every 25% progression lets out an audio cue, with the last 25% being a continuous audio cue. Health state. Your health state can be found on the bottom left of the UI. There are 3 health states to be aware of. Healthy or uninjured is indicated by this icon, good for survivors to be in most cases. Next is the injured state, which you can tell by this icon. You can become injured in many ways. The most common is getting hit by the killer's main weapon. In this state, you'll be leaving behind a blood trail for the killer to be able to track you. Survivors will also start grunting in pain, allowing the killer to hear you nearby. Survivors will now also limp, however this does not affect your actual movement speed. And then there's the dying state. The dying state is when the survivor takes damage from the killer's main weapon or certain special abilities while they are injured. This forces them to a crawl. In this state, you'll start bleeding out to death. It takes about 4 minutes to die from this state. Killers can pick up survivors in this state and bring them to the hook. The downed survivor can heal themselves to about 95%, but need a perk or a fellow survivor to finish off the remaining 5%. Killer attacks. Attacks made by killers vary but share a few basic principles. Basic attacks are made by the killer's main weapon. They come in 2 variations, fast attack and lunge attack. The fast attack is a short-ranged attack, which if missed has a short cooldown and speed loss. This is done by simply tapping the attack button. The lunged attack is a long-ranged attack that, if missed, has a longer cooldown and speed loss. Landing attacks move survivors' health state down a phase, and triggers an animation with speed loss that normally consists of a killer getting the blood off their weapon. Remember, survivors hit by the killer's attack get the on-hit sprint speed for 2 seconds, so killers, keep an eye out for the survivors. They might break line of sight. Sacrifice hooks. Sacrifice hooks, or just hooks for short, are randomly placed based on the trial ground. Each map has a minimum and maximum number of these hooks generated, with a minimum distance between the hooks, which can be influenced by offerings. Hooks can be sabotaged with a toolbox or the saboteur perk in about 2.5 seconds, making the killer unable to use the hook for about 30 seconds. This time can be increased with certain toolbox add-ons. When a survivor is hooked, it starts a sacrifice timer. The timer has 3 phases: summoning phase, struggle phase, and sacrifice phase. From 100% to 51%, you are in the summoning phase. In this phase, you are waiting to be rescued by a fellow survivor, or you can attempt to unhook yourself but at a cost. The success rate of unhooking yourself is about 4% unmodified, and you lose about 16% of your progress bar, making the second phase that much closer. From 50% to 1%, you are in the struggle phase. In this phase, you have to hit the action button repeatedly to stop yourself from being sacrificed. If you don't hit this action, or you are not fast enough, you will be moved immediately to phase 3. At 0%, it's sacrifice phase. This is where you are killed and taken by the entity and are removed from the trial to the post-match screen. Also, the hook is now considered unusable for the remainder of the trial. Other things to be aware of: Phase 1 and Phase 2 are about 60 seconds long each, bringing the total time on the hook to 120 seconds or 2 minutes. This means that trying to unhook yourself is a net loss of about 20 seconds. If unmodified, you only get 3 attempts. Also, if you were rescued before and get hooked again, you are immediately brought to the next phase in this process, so you can only be hooked a maximum of 3 times in a trial. Wiggling. Wiggling is when a killer has the survivor and is headed towards the hook. The survivor can wiggle to break free from their grasp. If successful, the killer is stunned and drops the survivor. The survivor is now in the injured state and can move freely again. Totems. Totems are randomly generated and placed like everything else. There are a total of 5 totems in each trial somewhere on the trial grounds. These come in 2 forms: dull totems, which look like this, and hex totems, which look like this. Cleansing a dull totem takes 14 seconds and rewards the player with 1000 blood points in the boldness category. Hex totems are totems that are powered by powerful killer perks. These are going to be protected by the killer, so be wary, but still cleanse them. Cleansing a hex totem takes 14 seconds and rewards players with 1500 blood points in the boldness category. Plus, it deactivates that killer's perk for the remainder of the trial. When a dull totem is cleansed, it just makes a small bone crack noise. But when a hex totem is cleansed, it makes a loud, thunderous noise telling all players on the trial grounds that it was cleansed. Be aware, cleansing totems does make an audio cue for the killer to hear, and the progress is reset when you let go of the action button. Chests are randomly placed across the trials, with a default number of 3 spawns. This can be influenced by players increasing the number by 2 per survivor to a maximum of 11 chests spawning, or it can be reduced by 2 from the killer, making the minimum 1 chest that can spawn. These chests take 10 seconds to search while making a 20-meter rummage noise. This noise can be reduced using certain perks. You can stop searching the chest, saving the search progress. However, you can't move until this animation completes. Note that pressing the quick action will cause an audio and visual cue for the killer. Items. Items are held objects the survivors use to aid them in the trial. Medkits allow for self-healing or faster healing of fellow survivors. Toolbox are used for sabotaging hooks or increasing repair speed. Flashlights are mainly used to blind killers, but have other functions. Maps are used to map out key interaction objects like gens, chests, totems, etc. Keys are used to unlock the hatch and more. I'll go deeper into items and their add-ons in another video. The basement. The basement has 4 special hooks in that they are unbreakable even if a survivor is sacrificed on them. A chest always spawns down there, so if there's only 1 chest that can be generated, its location most likely is there. It always has 4 lockers located in it, and the only entrance or exit is a single set of stairs. So the stairs most likely are trapped by trap-style killers like the Trapper or the Hag. Skill checks. Skill checks are an event that pops up at random when executing actions like repairing generators or healing. It has an audio cue to signal its appearance, and has a success segment that must be hit or cause a loud noise, which sends an audio-visual cue for the killer. Additionally, it regresses progress by 10% and pauses progression for about 3 seconds. This is considered a failed check. A good check triggers when you hit the transparent segment and rewards 50 blood points with no penalties. A great skill check triggers when you hit the white segment and rewards 300 blood points, plus 1% progress on generators, 3% progress on sabotage, and 5% progress on heals. These trigger roughly about 8% on repairs, 15% on healing others, 10% when healing yourself, or 12% when using medkits. Add-ons, perks, and statuses can augment and alter this information. Status effects. Status effects are modifiers and mostly temporary effects that can aid or hinder your character. I'll explain status effects and how they are applied in another video. However, I will explain 2 big ones to take notice of. First one is exposed. This status effect can be triggered in many ways from killer abilities or perks. The exposed status effect means that if you are hit from a damaging effect, you will be placed into the dying state regardless of your current health state. Second is the deep wound status effect. This status effect causes a unique health state and has a timer under the player's health icon. Once this timer runs out or the survivor takes any damage, they are placed into the dying state. This timer can be temporarily paused by running or being healed. The hatch. The hatch, or the black lock, is the second way survivors can escape the trial grounds. It looks like this, and is generated at the start of the trial. However, it will be invisible and closed until certain conditions are met. To reveal the hatch, survivors must repair one more generator than the current amount of survivors left in the trial. 4 alive means 5 generators, 3 alive means 4 generators, etc. The hatch will only open if there is one survivor left in the trial, or if a survivor uses a held item called a key. This will open the hatch for 30 seconds before it closes unless another condition keeps it open, like only one survivor is left. Interrupt. Interrupts is when a killer catches a survivor mid-action and can immediately take them to the hook. If they drop the survivor while carrying them, they will be in the dying state. If the survivor successfully wiggles off, then they will be in the injured state. This is regardless if they were grabbed in a healthy state. Interrupts can be done from repairs, vaulting, hatch jumping, and more. Survivors will know that they can be interrupted if you don't have control of your survivor due to animation, or during a process action like repairs. Endgame collapse. Endgame collapse is a trial phase to end the match in a timely manner and remove griefing. This triggers in 2 ways. If one of 2 of the exit gates are opened, or if a killer closes an open hatch. Things to note: killers can open the exit doors, and if a survivor leaves the trial by using the key on a hatch, killers can still close that before the 30 seconds and trigger this phase. This phase does a few things. The first thing it does is add a countdown to the end of the trial. Any living survivor still on the trial grounds when this finishes is instantly sacrificed to the entity. This countdown timer is 2 minutes long. However, if a survivor is in the dying state or is on the hook, this timer is slowed down by half. So this means the trial ends in about 2 minutes minimum or 4 minutes maximum. If the gates were not powered when the endgame collapse triggers, then all generators become blocked by the entity and both gates become powered. Memento Mori. Memento Mori, or Mori for short, is an offering the killer can use to be able to outright kill survivors in the dying state when certain conditions are met. Alright, now that we have a basic understanding what the terminology is for the game, I'm going to do the next 2 videos about the core gameplay loops of both killers as well as survivors. Maybe I'll see you in the fog.